Hello, my name is Chris Lemaire, and I'm one of the programmers at the American Cinematheque, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to this special tribute to the multi-talented artist and filmmaker Miranda July. We are here to celebrate Miranda's work across a variety of mediums on the occasion of the release of her new film from Focus Features, Kajillionaire. We encourage everyone in the audience to seek out the film if you haven't seen it yet. It's certainly one of the best films of the year, and it's now playing in select theaters. I want to thank Focus Features just for making this event possible. Last week, we had the opportunity to co-present with them an online career retrospective of Miranda's work. And so we're just so thrilled to kind of see this all culminate with tonight's conversation. And as you know, we have a special moderator tonight. Miranda is going to be joined in conversation by filmmaker Spike Jonze. So we are super thrilled that he could join us. Before we turn it over to them, we do have a special video for you. It's the trailer of Kajillionaire, so I hope you enjoy. Thank you.
After this person. And clear.
Now. There's a camera there, and there. Cash. Nope, any order.
This is not a cheap tie. Most people want to be Kajillionaires. That's the dream. That's how they get you hooked. Hooked on sugar, hooked on caffeine. Ha ha ha, cry, cry, cry. Me, I prefer to just skim.
So do I.
February, March, April?
We may have to pay in installments.
Rent is an installment. It's a monthly installment.
They are real characters, super unique. But you vouch for them, right?
She learned to forge before she learned to write. No, actually, that's how she did learn to write.
My favorite movies are the Ocean 11 movies. This is exactly the kind of thing that I've been wanting.
So what do your parents do, hon?
Hun, you've never called me that. But you could if it was a job, though, right?
You're addicted to them.
They're my parents.
In what sense?
We split everything 3 ways. We have since I was little. I don't want to do it that way this time.
Don't.
You want us to be false, fakey people. We don't make pancakes or wrap up little birthday presents or call you sweetheart or baby or
Do a little dance.
I always thought it was insulting to treat you like a child. And I thought we agreed on that.
We can only ever be how we are.
This is the way the big one starts. If you're lucky, you'll get crushed. And then you just die right then and there.
I'm Mr.
Well, it's my pleasure to do this with Miranda powerfully and originally, and everything she does is both wildly imaginative and deeply emotional and obviously original. So I'm happy to be here to celebrate her new movie, Kajillionaire, Kajillionaire with everyone. Also, right before we got on, Miranda said there's 1,000 people here, and I got really nervous suddenly. But but anyways, it's my pleasure to introduce Miranda, who's joining us. Miranda.
Yes, no, I am. Here I am. Hi, woo! Here's where the audience is going like, yay! We have to put all that in.
I can hear it.
Okay.
I'm so happy to do this with you, Miranda. And
Yeah,
the movies, I just watched the movie.
You did?
My pleasure. I watched it just before this, and I loved it. I loved it even more. The last time I saw it, obviously, was the rough cut. I don't know, a year ago.
Yeah.
And it was so strong and moving, and and I thought maybe before we get into it, it'd be cool to talk about a few of my favorite different things you've done. Just because I think I love, it's very, I love the way you work between all these different mediums. I see so many of them now, so many, them in progress and them being finished. And all of them are so you, and they're also, as I was saying, really emotional and original. And I always fascinated with how your brain works. And I think the first thing, well, first I saw your movie, Me, You, and Everyone We Know, before I knew you. But I remember seeing you make, the first thing I saw you sort of in progress making was that sculpture series that was in Madison Park in New York. And I've seen the play you did, New Society, and I just thought it'd be cool to talk about all these different things you do and how you decide what you're going to do next, where the idea comes from, and how you choose that medium for it. But maybe let's talk about the sculpture series. First, explain that.
Okay. Yeah, you were really like, we were hanging out a lot then. I remember you visited, okay, I'm not just reminiscing. How did I make that? I mean, it's funny, a lot of things start, like this isn't very magical, but it starts because I need an idea in that medium, like I know I just finished a book, so I want to make a movie, like I know what's coming, or I get an invitation, like in that case, I was invited to be in the Venice Biennale. And that's kind of a high pressure, like, gotta think of an idea situation. Although the weird thing about art is like, they're never gonna tell you like yes or no, or, it's a different world. It's kind of, you just do it. Yeah, I remember doing like some different sketches for that and going to Venice. So, I mean, this isn't going to be interesting to anyone if you don't know what the work is. It was pedestals. What I made, okay, how to make this interesting for people. So I go to Venice. I'm like, wow, I'm going to be in this big show in this city that I've like barely ever been in. And I noticed everyone in Venice like taking pictures of like monuments and art, and I thought, well, that's kind of cool, because those people then share those pictures with people back home, and so people who aren't ever going to go to Venice get to see Venice that way. And I thought most people will only see my art that I make in pictures. So I should make something people want to take pictures of so that it can be shared. And then I was like, well, what do people take pictures of themselves? And so then I made a series of, that's great. That's one of them. So some of them were tablets that you could put your head into. Yeah, that one's what I look like when I'm like, this is very high tech AV,
This one I love too. This one I remember you were making when I came by your studio.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it says, this is my little girl. Well, I can't really read it. You can.
Okay, yeah, it says, this is my little girl. She is brave and clever and funny. She will have none of the problems that I have. Her heart will never be broken. She will never be humiliated. Self-doubt will never devour her dreams.
Yeah, as a pedestal for a little girl to stand on. And so, so there were all these objects that you could interact with, and the idea was that, I wouldn't have to say, take a picture and share these. That is just what would organically happen. Right. This is not the first hole my finger has been in, nor will it be the last. I
loved it. It was so, and then I got to go to the opening with you in New York, and just watching everyone. I think it gave the feeling that a lot of your work gives, which is like a wonderment, and you feel you're part of it. And and it feels like I get this feeling from a lot of your work that was made for me. And I think that watching everybody.
Some of it was.
Oh, thank you. But I remember watching everyone in the park that day, and it felt like they felt like the art was made for them, and they related to it. And I think that's what's so special about, one of the things that's so special about your work is it's so it's like, it is a collaboration with the audience. And I think another piece that was truly a collaboration with the audience was the play you did called A New Society in New York that was at BAM. And if I can try and explain it, you came in to the theater by yourself and basically started this monologue about how you wanted to start a new society, and you invited the audience to create this new society with you. And as the evening goes on, you're talking about what's going on outside, and the years are passing outside, and society is decaying and falling apart outside, but inside our society is building. And you somehow like cast people right out of the audience to come up and read different parts and play different roles. And suddenly like we are all involved. And at one point we're all getting up, breaking up into groups and doing like yoga and dance. And the whole thing became this night where it was like, it was moving. It was everything like your work is. It was moving. It was like mind opening. And it felt like we were all a part of it. And I think that's I assume, I mean, you must love that part of what you do in like terms of like, talk about that part of the relationship to your work.
Yeah. I mean, that piece, pieces that rely on other people, on the audience like that, like it's sort of low stakes with the sculptures, right? Like if they don't, worst case scenario, they don't stand on them. But this one is like, I'm living and dying up there, right? Like, and I have built something where like there has to be someone in the audience who plays piano, because if there's not, then I don't have my accompanist for the night.
Sure, yeah.
And I know there's no plans, there's no pre-planning in that way. And so it's so like my heart is just pounding. It's so high stakes, but it kind of enters a sort of like altered state of like mutual dependency. Because of course, everyone coming up to the stage is fucking scared out of their mind. They're like, are you kidding me? I'm in this. And I'm not into that in a like, I mean, I'm like, I actually hate to be called on for things, like I don't like that. But I feel like what I hope is it's a little different because everyone can see I'm at their mercy too.
Yeah.
They could fuck with me if they wanted. Nobody did. I feel like I did it just few enough times and I kept it out of the press for the most part so that it was sort of like its own world for that night, which was the goal. I think when you make movies, it really, and you must feel this too, like the purpose of other mediums is really made clear. Like there'd be no point in doing something live if you couldn't really use the present moment as part of the work, because that's something you don't get to have in movies. And so it seems super like charged, and yeah, we're aware of it.
Yeah, I remember just being in awe that like you actually pulled it off, like that the end of that it climaxes into a really emotionally large and climactic conclusion, like, and that it sort of builds as it's like it was wild, and it was like a magic trick. And it's funny, I was looking up the movie online and just before this, and the thing I just wrote down the first 4 things I read, one of which reminds me of this conversation, is I gotta find it. It was, oh man, I'm sorry.
No.
It was basically how you walked a tightrope. The entire movie was walking a tightrope. Oh, here it is right here. And Miranda July walks a tightrope and never falls off. And I feel like that basically describes all of your work. I think especially that play, like this movie that's like kind of a con movie, kind of a heist movie, ultimately, it's kind of a love story, and it's ultimately about parenting and your relationship with your parents, and this really, deep, complicated idea of how to find peace in your relationships with your parents and what parenting is. And like, that is a high wire act that you actually pull off. And there's a good way to transition the movie. I remember when we first talked about it, you were talking about wanted to make a movie that was like more of a movie. And that you're talking about it like a con movie or a heist movie. And I was like, wow, that'll be interesting. What? And then when I saw the rough cut, I was like, okay, that is amazing, because it is that, and it's also completely this Miranda July movie. And maybe just start with what your intention, where you started with, where the idea, did it start? Yeah, where did it all start?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I did.
And am I remembering it right?
No, you are. I think I did have a feeling, I feel like I can speak more candidly to you because we know each other, although of course I'm really speaking to all these other people. I think I had a feeling after the last one, I'd sort of consciously made, like, I think you know when you're making like a sadder movie, like The Future was my last movie, that it's gonna be smaller, you know, like, especially I had made a movie, my first movie was considered a comedy. So I kind of knew that ride, and I didn't want to do it again. And then with this, I was like, oh, maybe there's no point in making movies which are a big medium. There's no way it's small if you're gonna make a feature. Maybe if you're gonna do it, the thing to do is like actually use the really inviting quality of it. And maybe you do cast recognizable faces. Like, I respond to that. Maybe that opens people up in a way. And it's a given that I'm gonna have my own weird ideas. You know, it's never like I'm gonna make someone else's broad movie. It's just more like, just as the present moment is part of the live medium, maybe this, since I am in this kind of more commercial medium, maybe there's something interesting about that. And so I had a couple ideas before the one that had the heist stuff attached to it, but those earlier ones also had parenting stuff in them, all in a really weird way. You know, there wasn't like a normal mom ever. It was more like sort of the very fabric of like, what is that relationship? Is it a total construction? Like, yeah. But the problem with these ideas, I don't remember if I told you any of them, but they were sort of good ideas, but they didn't have characters driving them. Have you ever had that, where it's like, this is the coolest idea ever? It's sort of arbitrary who this woman is, or who you know, like, whereas this movie, these three characters came to me first, that family. And I kind of was like, oh, wow, they can go anywhere. They can do anything. And I'm writing dialogue. And
were they a family focused on pulling cons, or?
Yeah, they always were. Yeah, that came with the like very first idea. And it's a real old, I mean, it's, you know, some of that's drawn from my like not totally law-abiding Portland punk days, whereby like thinking up scams was,
for example,
for example, that the luggage one in the movie, like that had been, you know, we did that. We didn't make that much money. And
how much did you make?
$300. This is a lot back then. But I remember the thing that struck me about it was that you had to pretend to be strangers in public, you know, which is a different, to be doing that for a scam, you know, I'm like, I feel like I'd done that before, maybe with like role playing, you know, like sexual role playing. That's another situation where you pretend to be strangers, but this is different because it's a family. It's not sexual, but it's got a sort of things that have a little kink like that to them. And then, because what if you become strange? What if your parents suddenly become strange in that moment when you were planning on only pretending they were strangers? And that was one of the first ideas that was kind of like, ooh, that's chilling. That would be very bad. I'm always worried that someone I know really well is gonna like body snatcher, you know, like not look at me and not really be there. So that was kind of enough. That was like the seed, really that baggage carousel scene that probably most people haven't seen, but you will see, and you can think back to this. Yeah.
And so Yeah, because the other thing, as I was looking up these headlines, as I looked up your thing, the first three headlines were, and I think to it. The three headlines was the movie shows how boomers stole from millennials and keep stealing. Second one said family is the real scam, and the third one, these are just the headlines, every family is kind of cult-like. I was like, that is a good movie. If these three people thought something like that, got that strong of a thing out of the film so I don't know, I thought that was have you been interacting with people, different people's reactions with the film?
Yeah, I mean, it's so strange because people are seeing it like in theaters, but it's not who we would usually start with in New York and LA, and which is kind of interesting in a way. It's like you start not with who people assume is your core audience. You start with who you usually come to a few weeks later, and I'm enjoying seeing those responses online, and everyone is tripped out because they're in these theaters that are barely full, and they're glad, right? That's allowing them to safely see it. So, I mean, what we're even rooting for is, it's very confusing. I mean, I guess health, and then like that some people go, and then, it will open soon, streaming on our computers. So yeah, I'm just starting to get, like I have a hard time looking at my movies after they're done and not being pretty critical. So, but I'm starting to have that thing where if I squint, I can kind of get a sense of what people are getting from it. And it's not what I feel anymore. When I watched it in Orange County on Friday, it is what I intended at the beginning. So if we can overlook me, like, I think, that's interesting. And I don't know if how it would have been if it was opening to an audience that wasn't living through a pandemic, or, that has become also part of the film because it just is the reality. So it will always have been a pandemic movie. Yeah.
And are you getting reactions about it in context of the pandemic?
Yeah. I mean, certainly there's these themes of like, our main character, Evan's character, Old Dolio, like touch is really intense for her. And I think it's really intense for a lot of the people watching right now. And there's a lot of fear about the big one in the movie, which was an earthquake, but now I think we might be in the big one. And then just, I mean, a bunch of random stuff that people point out to me, like it opens on the US Post Office, like these things that were so neutral and now are like incredibly loaded sites. So at that point, you're just like, okay, like, I'm just going to give into this. There is a path here. And it is, what I most care about is that it has a way to connect to people. And so if that wasn't possible, it'd be worse. I don't know. Yeah.
Of course. What about Old Dolio? I love the performance and the creation of the character and the way she talks, or the way she, everything about her. How did that form? Because I remember when you were trying to figure out who to cast, you were kind of talking about so many different things, and like, how did it go from this thing in your head that was a feeling down into this performance, this character?
Yeah. Well, I think what I started to believe was, I started to believe, like, okay, there's a lot of good actresses out there. None of them are Old Dolio, right? Like, you're not a working star if you're like Old Dolio. So it's really a matter of, like, first of all, who do I think is really, really good? Which I've always thought Evan was. And I think, did you ever see that Mildred Pierce, Todd Haynes's show version. It was like an HBO thing that she was in. And I remember at that point being like, oh, she's kind of like very special. Like there was something that kind of got under my skin there. I remember saying to Mike, like, that was a pretty incredible performance. So I just, it was like I wanted to meet with her and see, like, I don't know, is there anything here, like Old Dolio wise in you? And it was sort of stunning. I mean, you know how actors, they can sort of give you a signal like, oh, don't worry, like I'm not gonna like do it all out for you, but like I'm your girl. Like I've got this. And it was funny, over the course of a meal, I went from sort of just being nervous and not sure to being just so giddy. Like I had this secret that nobody knew Evan Rachel Wood was Old Dolio. And you know, we did like a process together, but it was only like 3 or 4 rehearsals to find that. I mean, she really kind of dropped into it. And that voice was, she brought that to me because it's her it's her voice that she started out with, and then she trained it higher, because I guess it was something to do with vocal notes or singing or something. And so that made me feel like, oh, well, if it's not some weird choice on my, you know, if this is something that feels familiar to you, it doesn't seem dangerous or too risky. And it felt like it helped her.
Yeah, she's so good in it. She's, yeah, and you know, she's always great, but this is so distinctly, uniquely comes from the chemistry of the two of you meeting and doing this thing together. But she's also has all these, you know, she's very funny, but also totally believable, and at moments very heartbreaking too. Just her yearning for her parents to be this thing they're not. And
yeah, I know, it's a long, slow burn, actually. Like when I saw it back as we started cutting it together, I was like, whoa, good thing she knew how to do this, like calibrate it over the whole thing, because I suddenly was like retroactively like, oh shit, I don't know how to do that. I don't think I was keeping an eye. I don't know, maybe I was, but it seemed sort of miraculous that like, yeah, just how subtly she evolved. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that the term well calibrated also applies to the storytelling, that there's a lot of story. And I think that I think this goes back to what you were saying originally a few years ago, that you wanted to make a movie that was more of a movie. And the amount of story, especially in the last 20 minutes, how well calibrated that the whole climax unfolds between, you know, going over to Melanie's house, and then going to dinner, you know, the birthday presents, the dinner, coming home, is the money in the...
No, actually, a lot of people hadn't seen it, so...
Oh, yeah. Okay. I forgot.
To walk us through the whole movie.
Yeah, I'm gonna read the script. Yeah, but anyways, it's so well calibrated storytelling-wise, and I think that is... and you never steer away from story, and not only in this, but I think in general in your writing, your short stories, in your book, and I think that but what's your relationship to story? Because I think sometimes people are sort of, I don't know. Yeah, what's your relationship to story? Is a vague enough question.
No, I mean, I will say, like, I kind of, in my mind, connect this, but it's funny, I connect my short stories and my first movie together as like, that's where I was narratively. Like I could only figure out a short thing, so that Me and You and Everyone We Know is basically sort of comprised of like 4 short stories almost interwoven. And then this movie, I really connect with my novel I wrote before it, The First Bad Man, which wasn't a heist story, but it did have a lot of like narrative twists and turns and reveals. And I was really kind of like, okay, let's just go all the way with this narrative thing. Like, let's buy into fiction. And as I was writing it, I remember thinking like, oh God, you know what this would be really useful for is a movie. Like that's the kind of thing people are always doing in movies. And so when I got done with that and was writing a script, it was like my muscles were still warm from the novel. And I loved all that. Like I wanted it to really all work out. You know, besides the character and the emotion, there is part of me that's just trying to, like, pretty enamored of the craft of it, of like how to build a plot like that. I might be over that with this one. That may have been like, I may be in a new phase now. But yeah, I remember you saying, maybe I can tell you, our watchers, the things that you in particular helped me on. Because there's two things that stand out in my mind. You watched a cut and you had really good notes. I still have, you know, I have all my notes, and I looked at what the Spike notes were. And I remember there's one scene, you know, we did just very few reshoot scenes, but one I always think when I see it, I'm like, thank you, Spike. And it wasn't that you said, you know, what to shoot, but I remember you pointed out, like, we need to know that she is allied with her parents, like early on, something like that. There was some like real clear thing. And you give a good kind of note, because it's how I imagine you are directing, where it's like very clear, but it doesn't do the work for you. So that for someone like me, I'm like, oh, yes. I got it, you know, which is what you want. You want the person to want to do it, to want to perform or, you know, write the thing. And then, so that was, I really like the Spike scene. The one, I don't want to say what it is because I don't want everyone to think it when they watch it, but I'll put it in the chat. And then another thing was, I was really struggling on the music, if you recall. Yeah, and I was working with like all these amazing people. Everyone was trying so hard to like understand me and help me, but I just wasn't, like, I did sort of like multiple tries with multiple people, and I was like the princess and the pea, and of course I was doubting myself, like, what is wrong with me that I never had this problem before, and I had locked picture and then been like, this score doesn't work, I need to start from scratch again. And I remember I called you because I knew I was like, my budget was done, my days were done, I didn't really have anything more. And I remember I called you like I walked out of the editing suite, called you in a total panic, probably crying, and was like, what do I do? What, I need to call Dee Dee Gardner now, and what do I say? And you said, say this, say, I need your help. And I hung up the phone and I called Dee Dee Gardner and I said, Dee Dee, I need your help, which I never would have done in a million years. Like, my approach would have been, Dee Dee, everything's okay, I totally got this. Just some like super sideways way that wouldn't have really given her the opportunity to like save the day. Dee Dee Gardner's my producer, my like, you know, amazing supportive producer, who in that moment needed to like get us more money and more time so that I could really figure out my score, that I, you know, because I loved this movie, but I needed that last thing. And it was a real lesson, because whoops, where did he go? Oh dear. Well, I guess I'll continue talking about that lesson. Hi, Chris.
We might have lost him, but we can get into audience questions, and I'm sure he'll come back and join us.
Well, I'm going to finish that thought just to keep continuity.
Yes, please do. We got 600
pretend that you're Spike. So okay. It was just a lesson in like, let other people, like, I'm so used to being scrappy and like, you know, I got this, I can do everything myself, you know, maybe I'll pay for it somehow, you know, and a lesson in like, no, hi, still talking to you.
Was he back?
Lesson.
Keep
Fun.
Just a lesson in like, let that person do their job, because there's real honor in doing that job. There's real honor in like helping a filmmaker be the very best, and like that allows like a producer to be the very best. So like say those, do that, allow an opening there. And and she not only like that same day she gave me the name Emile Mosseri of, you know, the person who ended up really making this magical score. Yeah.
You had just done the Last Black Man in San Francisco with him, right?
Right. She had just done that, and she was like, you know, it's like, I came to believe actually that maybe I was stalling on some level. Like he wasn't ready yet. He hadn't ever made a film score. He had premiered it like that day that I called and said, I need your help, you know, so like he didn't exist 6 months earlier when I was, you know, so I in the end I was like, oh, I wasn't wrong, but that was a close one. And sometimes it is.
The score is so good, and it really matches the specificity of the movie and also the emotional scale of the movie, and it plays Dolio so well. And like the moment that I was watching tonight, when they open the door and all the presents are there, there's like, it's played with sort of tension. Her anxiety is played in the music choice. And maybe what was this, how did you what's the name of the composer?
Emile. Yeah.
How did Emile approach the score, and what was the like what were the conversations?
Yeah, I mean, we had 5 weeks, you know. It was like, I'm just gonna sit there and we're just gonna do this together. But what made it magical was that he came in with like 2 or 3 pieces of music he'd already made on his own, and so he played those first, and they were like the love theme and I think what plays in the gas station. Anyways, there were these really key pieces of music, so I didn't have to ever really do the leap of faith. Like I just leapt right into that music, which was sort of astounding at that point to begin with so much, you know. I was really, and again, I think he thinks I was really breathing down his neck the whole time because I was sitting there. But from my point of view, I was super hands off. Like I was there, but I wasn't as picky as I usually am because because we had started, you know, so well that I wasn't like micromanaging, which probably, anyways, I need to stop doing that in general.
I keep talking to you for a while, but I'm getting a message that we should open this up to questions from the audience.
Yes. Okay.
We've gotten plenty of questions, and thank you, Spike and Miranda. This has been great so far. And Spike, you're welcome to stick around and participate here. But our first question.
What if they ask him a question? Okay. Or what if I don't know the answer and he needs to answer it?
Right. Absolutely. The question is, does your sensitivity around choosing which medium would best serve the story purely spring from intuition, or is it more of a process for you? Or which came first, they're saying, the form or the feeling?
Right. I mean, as I sort of said, it almost always is just that I want to have an idea in a particular medium. I mean, sometimes it's like stupid that way. Like I'll be like, hey, I bet I could make an app. Let me think of an app idea. You know, like sometimes the medium is inspiring because you're like, what could you do with that? And so, yeah, I think it's a little less magical than people think. I'm just like kind of mercenary about what I need. And then I am always writing things down every day and kind of categorizing them. So there are some broad categories like art ideas, you know, and occasionally I'll go in there and I'll be like, is there anything I can use, you know, in there that's a more free floating idea?
Well, a similar question we got was, did you always treat all of your artistic interests and talents like somewhat equally, or did you have a moment where you decided which which discipline you primarily wanted to pursue?
Well, I think I started out like most people thinking I'm going to be and it was a director. I'm going to be a director when I was in high school. But then like I didn't have a camera and it was easier to do plays, but I still called them like live movies, you know, like I didn't, I still saw myself as like a movie director. And I guess what happened was along the way, the different things that I did were so interesting. And I realized that they had real, like they were important to me, that I got different things out of them, that by the time Me and You and Everyone We Know kind of was this breakout, I was a little annoyed when people would be like, the indie film director. And I was like, well, that seems super narrow. I mean, thank you, but like, I really have to publish this book of short stories so that I can make room for who I really feel like I am. And that's not so much like needing everyone to see me as like so unique, but just for my own creative process so that I can like not have a heart attack about the fact that I'm not making another movie right away. Like I needed to like widen the space. Yeah.
This question.
Do you feel awkward just hanging out there, or is it like fine, Spike?
Me, I like listening to it.
Okay, all right, thank you.
This question says, at what age did you make the first thing you were really proud of? And she says, or this person says, I'm 16 and feel very lost creatively and think maybe I'm losing faith in myself.
Oh, right, that's a good age for that. I still remember the thing I made right around then that was not very good, and being like, oh shit, what a fraud, you know. And I remember it because I remember I had somehow I'd been given, or my dad had been given like a fancy pen, and I wrote something with this fancy pen, and then I realized it was really bad, and so it was sort of made worse by the pen. Like it was like it led me down a bad path. Anyways, but at 17, I wrote this play called The Lifers, which was based on my correspondence with a man in prison, a murderer. And that was the first thing I wrote and directed that and put it on in this punk club in Berkeley, where I grew up. And I thought, okay, like I know this isn't like great when I was sitting in the audience watching it, but like, this'll be it. Like, I remember thinking like, that's it, I'm hooked. There's nothing better than this. And which was sort of a disturbing, like, I think my parents realized that had happened and that there was no plan B, and I wasn't planning on pursuing anything else. And it was like some rocky years, like a lot of fights, because, you know, it was still a little vague what that even was. Yeah.
Another question we have is, would you recommend film school?
Right. If you like that kind of thing, if you like to be taught, and some people do, and some people like, you know, thrive from that kind of community. I don't like to be taught. Like, I'm the kind of person who, even if you're just driving around and you're like, oh, there's our, you know, our park, I'll tell you a little history about it. I'm like, please don't, you know, that like anything at all school-like is just, I want to flee. So it was never going to be how I learned. I need to like break it apart and figure out the pieces and sort of reinvent the whole system for myself so that I can understand it. But go for it. If it seems exciting, do it.
Miranda, you talked a bit about your first feature, Me and You and Everyone We Know, and we've got a question here that says, I love the interaction with you and the shoe salesman in your first movie. What inspired you to write that?
Oh, well, for some reason, I think they're talking about our walk and talk when they say the interaction, but maybe they just mean all the interactions. I'm thinking, well, I'll say that there's one scene where we walk a block together and we pretend it's our whole lives. And I've always been interested in sort of time itself. Like, how do you get at that? Like the time of a life or of, it's like a weird thing to me, the invention of time. And also in the future, you know, I had like stopping time, and I like, so it's romantic and stuff, and it's about our relationship, and it's about, you know, also that beautiful thing when you like fall into a game with someone and you're both in it, like you're both in the dream together. And what makes the joy happen is you're both committing to it. No, not one person isn't going like, well, I don't know, that's weird. That seems weird. Like, you know, fuck you. Like, I mean, people who do that just have no time for them. So that they both went in on it, to me, is the most romantic thing. And I guess, and that's an example of a walk I would like to have.
Switching gears back to Kajillionaire, and I'm sorry we're jumping around so much, but someone wants you to talk about working with Richard Jenkins. What were his thoughts on his character?
Yeah, he's so great. He, let's see, he doesn't like to know any backstory. So, you know, which is kind of a big thing for this movie. There could be a lot of questions about like how he got where he is and stuff. And he says, if it's not on the page, I don't need to know it. We would have like little kind of play arguments about things. Sometimes they would go over the course of the day, like he would have a plan for something he wanted to say, and I'd be kind of like, maybe just say the thing that I wrote. And then he would do both. And it was always really, like, I felt just kind of honored that, I mean, yeah, that he was like really digging into it with me. And one really, I remember a moment, like, hopefully he's not watching this. I remember a moment of watching him, like, he was like repeating something to himself, and I realized like, oh, it's high stakes every time, you know, like he's like totally there, and kind of, this could not work, and he's being totally present to it every single time, take after take, you know, over the course of a life. And so what I am watching is not less than any performance of his I've ever seen. Like, he is, I don't know, there's something, yeah, just something very moving about that. And last thing I'll say about him is, once I was having a rough day, but whatever, some days are rough, and, you know, I'm holding it together, and as he's leaving, he just whispers to me, hang in there, kid. And it was like, I think I had to like bite the inside of my cheek not to just start crying so hard right then. It was like all my fatherish, just, it was somehow, hang in there, kid, was like the sweetest thing anyone had ever said. Like, I see you, I see this is like kind of a fucking nightmare what you're dealing with. And I don't know, it was just, yeah, it was so kind. And so good and so funny. Oh my God. There's so much stuff that we just kept loving in the edit. Like, we would just watch him like we were watching TV, you know, we would forget, like, oh yeah, we got to cut some of this out and like make a movie. And yeah.
Well, we are all out of time, but I think that's a great note to end on. Sorry to end abruptly here, but I want to thank you, Miranda and Spike. Thank you so much for this amazing conversation. And to our audience, just thank you for tuning in, and please watch Kajillionaire. We couldn't recommend it enough. It's an incredible film, absolutely.